If you haven't heard, our best deal of the year is happening now. Get 50% off annual memberships. No code needed. DailyWire.com/Black Friday. Join now. The Denver mayor threatens civil war if President Trump follows through on his promise to deport illegal aliens, while a top NATO official warns of imminent world war if we don't stop globalism. Sounds like President Trump has his work cut out for him. I'm Michael Knowles. This is The Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. Jon Stewart is mocking the liberal media. He's hitting their media credibility in a latest sign of the times. Also, we find out the future of Kamala Harris's political career. We'll get to all of that. But first, go to thecandleclub.com. In a world where our traditional way of life is under attack, the Candle Club stands as a beacon of truth. Started by a mom who refused to be silenced by cancel culture, the Candle Club is now America's premier conservative candle company. Each hand-poured candle supports family values while filling your home with premium, toxin-free fragrances. With 9 unique brands, from Salty and Lit's faith-inspired collections to exclusive Daily Wire host collaborations, including that of yours truly, Michael Knowles, and Ben and Matt and Brad and whatever. We are finally and figuratively letting truth burn bright. Find gifts under $30, perfect for moms, aunts, neighbors, teachers, or any conservative who cherishes quality, family, and tradition. Live free and smell fancy this holiday season with the Candle Club. Go to thecandleclub.com today. The Denver mayor, Mike Johnston, has suggested that he will use Denver police to stop federal agents from enforcing immigration law. He was asked what would happen when the feds come in to enforce the law and deport the illegal aliens, many of whom are violent criminals who are here, obviously, by definition, illegally. And he says, look, we're going to have Denver police waiting for them. We're going to have Denver police stationed along, and then I'm going to encourage our ordinary citizens to get out in the street and resist. So the man is threatening more or less civil war if the federal government does what the voters asked the federal government to do, which is pretty basic. It's enforce the immigration laws. Now, he's walked that back a little bit. He realized that wasn't such a good look to threaten a literal insurrection after the Democrats have been running on the perils of insurrection for years now. So instead he says, look, I am willing to go to jail if the federal government tries to deport illegal aliens.
I would certainly protest it, and I would expect other residents would do the same.
Trump's new borders czar, Tom Homan, has said that he is willing to arrest leaders like yourself for standing in the way of these policies that they want to enact. Would you be willing to go to jail for these things?
Yeah, I'm not afraid of that.
No, I'm not afraid of jail. Okay, so challenge made against the Trump administration. What does Tom Homan, the deportation czar, have to say about the Denver mayor's threat that he's willing to go to jail?
You're absolutely breaking law. All you have to do is look at Arizona versus U.S. You'll see these breaking law. But look, me and the Denver mayor, we agree on one thing. He's willing to go to jail. I'm willing to put him in jail. Because there's a statute, it's Title 8 United States Code 1324 III, and what it says is, it's a felony if you knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from immigration authorities. It's also a felony to impede a federal law enforcement officer. So if we don't want to help, that's fine. He can get the hell out of the way. But we're going to go do the job. President Trump has a mandate for American people. We got to secure this country. We got to save American lives. And I find it shocking that any mayor of a city would say, President Trump's been clear. We want to concentrate on public safety threats and national security threats. I find it hard to believe that any mayor or governor would say they don't want public safety threats removed from their neighborhoods. I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on in Denver, but we're going to go and we're going to fix it. If he don't want to fix it, if he don't want to protect his communities, President Trump and ICE will.
I love this guy. Can we just make this guy the permanent deportation czar? He says, look, we agree on one thing. He's willing to go to jail. I'm willing to send him to jail. All right, I guess that's good. Is that called bipartisanship? Is that called working across the aisle? I think it is. It's very simple. Ronald Reagan said it well. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to fully live up to the potential of this observation, in part because he had a Democrat Congress, in part because the illegal immigration problem wasn't as pronounced as it is now. But he had a simple observation. Illegal immigration is illegal. It's simple as that. And if some two-bit mayor of some ever increasingly failing city like Denver is going to try to impede federal immigration authorities who have been given a massive mandate by the American people, okay, good luck. Send them to jail. The libs have been threatening to send our top politicians to jail over nothing in recent years. I think it's perfectly fine for the top immigration enforcement agents in the country to threaten jail against two-bit Democrats who are actually breaking federal law. Now, President Trump, of course, is moving full steam ahead. And speaking of the Democrats trying to put him into jail, those efforts seem to have failed for now. The judge here has agreed to dismiss President Trump's 2020 election interference case. This is news as of yesterday. Jack Smith, is a special prosecutor going after Trump on behalf of Joe Biden. He, on Monday, filed a motion to dismiss that case as well as the classified documents case ahead of President Trump's inauguration. Why is that? Why are the federal prosecutors and judges dropping two major federal cases against Trump? Because of the DOJ's presidential immunity policy. So you can't prosecute sitting presidents. For all of American history, that has extended to past presidents, presidents who had already served, who might be looking at another term in the future. We just don't jail our presidents in this country. We didn't until the Democrats tried to. And now, because there is actual presidential immunity on the books, Jack Smith and the Dems have to stop trying to imprison Trump for now. For now. This is a reminder. The only reason Trump is not going to jail is because he won. The liberal media are even underscoring this. They're saying it's only because of presidential immunity, not because the charges lacked merit. The Democrats would currently be fighting to put this man in jail had he lost, and they will continue to try to put him in jail after he leaves office. I think conservatives, we want to have a normal country, and so we get a little complacent. Okay, woo, we were saved. We almost had that horrid woman and all these crazy liberal policies, packing the Supreme Court, getting rid of the filibuster, imprisoning our political opponents. But that didn't happen. Okay, good. Let's let bygones be bygones. I hope that we can get to a place in the culture where we have justice restored, where we don't need to worry about presidential candidates and former presidents being imprisoned, but we're not there yet. They want to put Trump in jail still. The only thing that stopped them is the mandate from the American people. So we need to reset our norms and our laws and our regulations to make sure that the Democrats cannot do what they obviously want to do when they have the chance. Now, speaking of battles, a top NATO official is warning businesses to prepare for a wartime situation. This is not even some low-level NATO staffer. This is the chairman of NATO's military committee. This is Dutch Admiral Rob Bauer, who says, we're seeing that with the growing number of sabotage acts, and Europe has seen that with the energy supply. We thought we had a deal with Gazprom, the Russian energy company. We actually had a deal with Mr. Putin. Same goes for Chinese-owned infrastructure and goods. We actually have a deal with Xi Jinping. We thought, the way we told ourselves in our liberal globalist kind of language is Europe, the West, America has a deal with this kind of deal with China. Or Europe has this kind of energy deal with Russia. But no, it turns out the people who run those countries actually still have a say over how those countries are run. It turns out that hard power politics still matter. Turns out that America, that the world rather, is not just run by technocrats in perfectly rational sorts of rules that don't have any human input into them. No. If Europe is at war with Russia, Russia is going to use Europe's energy dependence on Russia against Europe. If China goes to war with the United States, China is going to use America's dependence on Chinese manufacturing against the United States. Bauer here noted Western dependencies on supplies from China. 60% of all rare earth materials are produced and 90% of them are processed in China. That's huge. Said the chemical ingredients for sedatives, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, and low blood pressure medicines also come from China. So what's his conclusion? He says, we are naive if we think the Communist Party will never use that power. Yes, you're right. I think a lot of people in the West were naive. When the liberals in the West were cheering China's ascendance in the World Trade Organization, when liberals in the West were on the left and the right, frankly, and the Democrats and the Republicans, when they were cheering that the world was becoming flat, that China was growing. They said a rising tide will lift all ships. Oh, it's good. Doesn't matter. We don't need to manufacture anything here in America. Let's have all those poor people with slave labor in China manufacture all of our goods, and then we'll get them for cheaper because we won't have to pay fair wages, and then our GDP might tick up and we'll be a much stronger country. Don't worry, they'll never use that for a strategic advantage against us. Well, now, this NATO official saying business leaders in Europe and America need to realize that the commercial decisions they make have strategic consequences for the security of their nation. Very true. Furthermore, he says businesses need to be prepared for a wartime scenario and adjust their production and distribution lines accordingly. Because while it may be the military that wins battles, it's the economies that win wars. This is good advice generally. I think we all saw how clear this was in COVID, when our supply chains got screwed up and all of a sudden we didn't have anything anymore. So it's a really, really important lesson. It's also a final admission that globalism is a failed ideology. Liberal globalism, the notion that national identities don't matter, national loyalties don't matter. We're all just citizens of the world. The notion that polities serve economies rather than the other way around. The notion that it doesn't matter where our goods are manufactured. The notion that we're all just one, kumbaya, that has failed. And this is an admission that this failed. Because the minute any kind of conflict breaks out, which is a recurrent and ineradicable theme in human life, from the minute that breaks out, those nations are going to reassert themselves. Those national loyalties are going to reassert themselves. And the dependencies that we have on other nations are going to become a big strategic problem. Now, I want to tell you about public rec. We need to talk about menswear, folks. Go to publicrec.com, use code Knowles. Traditional dress pants, they've become unnecessarily restrictive. All those little skinny boys like to wear their leggings. Casual alternatives often look unprofessional, but Public Rec's Dealmaker pant has combined the comfort of athletic wear with the refined appearance of traditional trousers. As someone who values tradition and comfort, I can tell you these pants are revolutionary. Whether I'm recording at the DailyWire studio or meeting with colleagues, the Dealmaker pants' formal 5-pocket style and proprietary workday fabric provide both sophistication and comfort. What truly sets these pants apart is their precise sizing system. Don't settle for arbitrary small, medium, and large sizes. You get exact waist and length measurements, ensuring a perfect fit the way men's clothing should be made. Stop suffering in regular pants and give the gift of comfort this holiday season. For a limited time only, our listeners get 20% off when you use code Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, at checkout. That is 20% off with code Knowles, K-N-O-W-L-E-S, at publicrec.com. After you purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please show your support and tell them that our show sent you. Give yourself or someone you love the gift of comfort this holiday. Speaking of the military, big report out of the Times of London. Now, speaking of weird sex stuff, I have just read the most disturbing story I've read in many weeks, and it's a really excellent piece of journalism that I encourage all of you to read, and this is going to be the most shocking part. It was in the New York Times. Now, actually, it was in the New York Times Magazine, just has a little bit more serious journalism to it, but this was really, really good. Credit where credit's due. Headline: An IVF mix-up, a shocking discovery, and an unbearable choice. 2 couples in California discovered they were raising each other's genetic children. Should they switch the girls? By Susan Dominus. Really encourage you to go read this. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes. There's a couple. They went through in vitro fertilization. That is to say, they went to the baby store. They procured this procedure. They had scientists create human embryos, create persons in a petri dish. Then typically most of those persons are frozen away or killed, just destroyed. But one of them implanted and took, and they gave birth to this baby. And immediately the father says, wait a second, that baby doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like either of us. That baby actually looks part Asian. Neither of the parents were Asian. So he had these fears. Oh, yikes, what if the IVF clinic made a mistake? The wife didn't want to hear about it. She seemed to have some fears too. Finally, some friends of theirs, a couple months in, say, hey, man, that ain't your kid. I'm a little worried. Maybe you should get a test. They get a test. They find out, yeah, it's not their kid. This mother carried the baby to term. It's not even like it was a mix-up at the hospital. This woman carried this child, but it wasn't their genetic child. They call the IVF doctor. Like first they call a lawyer, then they call the IVF doctor. And they say, hey, we think this happened. They find out happened to another couple. Now, at this point, they say, where's our kid? Was our kid destroyed in the lab? They frequently, IVF companies destroy human embryos, kill babies. Was our kid destroyed? Was our kid lost? That happens. Was our kid given to someone else on the other side of the world? They find out there is a match. Their child was given to another couple, and the child is 10 minutes down the street. But you got to remember, there's two women here have brought these babies to term for 9 months. These mothers are the only mothers these children have ever known. They've swaddled them, they've cuddled with them, they've fed them, they've nursed them, they've done all the things, but they're not really their babies. So they find out, okay, these are the wrong kids. I'll get into the actual writing of this piece now. 10 minutes later, a babysitter arrived to watch the baby, while Alexander and Daphne, the parents, took Olivia, their 5-year-old daughter, to see Frozen 2, a long-promised outing. In the theater, they sat on either side of her, tears running down their cheeks in the dark, trying to understand what this news meant for their family. If the clinic had given them another couple's embryo, what did that suggest about the fate of their own embryos? If they tried to find out and inform the clinic of their error, could they end up losing May? Even if they did nothing, could they lose May to her genetic parents who might already be desperately trying to find her? So the couples finally meet up. They're crying, they're sobbing, they're absolutely miserable. They decide to switch the babies. But then what about the 5-year-old sibling? Daphne explained to her 5-year-old daughter, Olivia, that there was another baby who was a part of their family and that she was gaining a sister after a bit of a mix-up. Daphne said nothing about the switch, but Olivia was quick to figure it out. Wait, did this mean they were losing May? The father responded, no, he assured her, we'll always have her. But Daphne groaned internally. That wasn't true. It'd be an awful promise to break. At the same time, she knew that in that moment, it seemed like the only possible answer, to lie to her. Not say, yeah, actually, you're losing your sister that you've come to love over these past 11 months. Alexander told Olivia not to be scared, but Olivia started shutting down. She made a small whimpering noise. Yeah, she was losing her sister. She asked again, were they going to give her sister away? As Daphne tried to comfort Olivia, she burned with anger at the clinic. Somewhere along the way, a mistake had been made. That's true. And there's plenty of reason to blame the clinic, but it's not only to blame the clinic. Because this couple chose to do this. They chose to do this thing. For all the right reasons, for all the good intentions, for all the pain of infertility, they chose to do this thing that led them to this point. And here's the kicker. They hired a lawyer, and the lawyer said that he had personally encountered upwards of 10 cases of switched embryos in IVF. He had personally represented 1,000 plaintiffs accusing clinics of misconduct or negligence, usually involving loss, damage, and killing of embryos. And this lawyer believes that the public becomes aware of only a fraction of the errors that occur in fertility clinic labs. What happens to this couple, these two couples? What does this mean for how we think about IVF? We'll talk about that in a moment. First, I want to tell you about Pure Talk. Go to puretalk.com/Knowles. Have you ever thought about what charities and causes the brands you give your hard-earned money to support? Pure Talk, my cell phone company, supports veterans. I think that's a pretty good cause. As a veteran-led company, it is their passion project. That is why Pure Talk has alleviated $10 million in veteran debt. That's why they donate tens of thousands of dollars every month to help prevent veterans' suicide. It's why they just donated $50,000 to MicroWorks, providing scholarships to veterans learning the trades after active duty. Now, is that not a company that you can get behind? I think it is. Time to jump ship from Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. There is a better option. Pure Talk gives you the same great coverage, America's most dependable 5G network, for half the cost. You will also be helping our vets. It's a win-win. Here's the best part. When you switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk on a qualifying plan, you will get 1 year free of DailyWire Plus Insider. The only way you can get this special offer is by going to puretalk.com/Knowles, KNWLES, or call and mention my name. Go to puretalk.com/Knowles, KNWLES today. Switch to a qualifying plan. Get 1 year free of DailyWire Plus Insider. Also, you got to go check out my interview with Karl Malone, NBA legend, NBA Hall of Famer, with whom I am now selling a sampler pack of cigars, because Karl has his own cigar made by La Aurora. Really, really great smoke. I had one yesterday. We're selling that with Mayflower. Go check out my interview with Karl Malone down in Ruston, Louisiana, at his Legends Cigar Lounge. Crazy story from New York Times Magazine. Two couples, their kids, they go through IVF. They accidentally implant the wrong kids. They're raising the wrong kids. They find out they have the wrong kids. Now they have to decide, do we give up our kid that we've been raising for 11 months? Do we tell our other daughter that she's going to lose her sister? Sorry, bye. Whoopsie daisy. Oops. A little mistake. Or do we keep the kids? It's kind of like kidnapping. What about the rights of people to their own genetic children? What happens? What happens? The story concludes with these people's lives ruined, basically. They have an impossible choice. They have to either give away the kid that they've gestated and have been raising and has become part of their family. Just give the kid away. Whoops, never mind. To take their genetic child, or they have to abandon their genetic child, their actual progeny, their biological progeny, and just let that kid be raised by someone else without any influence over how that kid's going to be raised. Impossible choice. Neither of those are good options. So for now, what they say they're doing is they're just going to raise the kid together. So the resolution to this is they're going to live in a weird kind of platonic polycule. And we'll see how long that lasts. This has been tried before because these kinds of errors, IVF companies implanting the wrong embryos, sometimes creating the wrong embryos from the sperm from one father and the egg from a mother that don't know each other. Oopsie daisy, whoops. It happens in corporations. It happens in commerce sometimes. People just make mistakes. And usually you make a mistake and it means that the hem of your dress is a little bit off. But in this case, you make a mistake and a human being was created that you never intended to create who now doesn't really have a claim to any parents. But oops, that's business, isn't it? That's just how it works in corporations. There's going to be some margin of error. You want to be efficient. You want to reduce the error, but sometimes it happens. And in this case, you give babies away to the wrong parents, or you create babies who don't really have a claim to parents, or who do have a claim to parents that won't be recognized by society. In case anyone's missed the point, IVF is simply morally unacceptable. It's simple as that. I get why people do IVF. I know many people listening to this show right now have done IVF. I sympathize as to why you did it. My wife and I experienced infertility for 2 years. I know it's just awful. I know. I see how tempting it is. I was tempted myself. It's simply morally unacceptable. And it's morally unacceptable for some of the reasons that people hear, that it leads to the killing of many babies because it leads to the destruction or permanent freezing of embryos. Indefinite freezing of embryos. Nothing's permanent. They'll be killed eventually, most likely. But also because it commoditizes human life, and it establishes the domination of science and technology over the origin and destiny of human life, because it denies the legitimate rights of children to be the product of a specific conjugal act of his parents, his mother and father, who are bound together in a permanent union, and because it exerts an undue demand over the future destiny of individual human beings and of humanity writ large. It's just morally unacceptable. There is no moral case for it. The only person who can be said to have rights in reproduction are children who have the rights to their parents, to be the specific conjugal act of their parents in holy matrimony. Or even unholy, even in civil matrimony. But that's the right. No one has a right to a child. Children are not commodities. Children are not accessories. Children do not exist to fulfill our desires and to be conveniences for us. It's not how it works. And the only argument I've ever heard that is somewhat compelling for IVF, I've heard one, and I know, and some of you are probably yelling that argument right now. The argument is, I only have my kid because of IVF, so screw you. That's the argument. I've heard it many times. I only have my kid. I only have my grandkid because of IVF, so screw you, man. I get it. I get it. I understand that emotional appeal, but that's what it is. It's not an argument. Anything that gives us kids is good. You don't really believe that. You think cheating on your spouse is good. So you can make a kid by cheating on your spouse. You think that's a good thing? That means that cheating on your spouse is a positively good moral act? No. You can conceive a child in. Does that justify? The children who are conceived in any circumstance are good. It is good to have children. That doesn't justify extramarital sex. That doesn't justify having an Ottoman-style harem, as one of my favorite Twitter accounts pointed out. It doesn't, of course not. Obviously, there are immoral means to have children. And this is one of them. The costs are simply too high. The moral compromises and immoral actions that you have to engage in to do this are too great, and the attack on the family, and specifically the attack on the rights of kids, is too great. I don't think the New York Times writers understood how persuasive this piece is against IVF. They probably didn't, because their intellects have been darkened. That's one evidence of that, is that they work for the New York Times. Read this piece, read this article, an IVF mix-up, a shocking discovery, and an unbearable choice. Recognize that these sorts of accidents have been going on for decades. Read this piece and tell me what the moral and legal argument for IVF is. I don't see it. Now, speaking of credibility issues, Jon Stewart has just come out to mock not the conservatives, as he usually does, but he's mocking Joe and Mika, Morning Joe and Mika on MSNBC, because of their obsequious display at Mar-a-Lago. He goes off.
Joe and Mika going down there might be one of my favorite, when they had to come out and go, and so we did. Like, they spent the year going, this man will destroy all that you hold dear. He is a Hitler Mussolini cocktail mix, and we must all say, literally 1 week later, they're like, so we go, we have lunch, a light lunch. I get the watercress salad, and you know Joey. He loves shrimp fra diavolo. So and the Mar-a-Lago shrimp fra diavolo is delicious. I thought that was one of the more remarkable, but it shows the performative nature of so much of all of this, which is, again, when you talk about credibility, like,
Okay, so this line of attack by Jon Stewart is notable because it's the exact same line of attack he's been making for decades. I used to watch The Daily Show in its early days. I used to watch The Daily Show on Comedy Central before Jon Stewart was the host of it, back when it was Craig Kilborn. And this was his attack. The show never had very high ratings, but it did very well among journalists and the political class, so it had an outsized influence. And one of the infamous moments from Jon Stewart was when he went on the CNN show Crossfire and he just harangued Tucker Carlson. He just brutally attacked Tucker Carlson and said, you don't have any credibility. This is all performance. This isn't real debate. He made fun of Tucker for wearing a bow tie. The show was canceled shortly thereafter, and Tucker left CNN shortly thereafter. It was a brutal, vicious attack. And it was this attack. It was this exact attack that he's making right now. What is notable about it is he used to make that attack primarily against right-wingers. He is now making that attack against left-wingers. It's the same attack, but what he is identifying is a credibility issue that is flip sides. He would attack the media broadly, but he would focus more on the right. Here, the media that has the credibility issue, it's the left-wing media. And that's a funny little bit he did. You know, Trump is Hitler. Trump's going to destroy our whole country. Ooh, he won? Yikes, we better go suck up at Mar-a-Lago. All right, we had a lovely lunch. It was fun. Oh, you know Trump. You know him. It's a recognition of a realignment. It's the same sort of thing that we've been talking about for years at this point. It's a realignment of American labor moving more right-wing. It's a realignment of the media. It's a really a total reordering of the media, which we'll get to in one moment, because the establishment media are losing a lot of their power and their influence. But it's a realignment even of the anti-establishment comedians. The establishment is incontrovertibly left-wing now. And so the people who look ridiculous in the eyes of even leftist comedians like Jon Stewart are on the left. Now, on the future of media, we're going to have a little bit of an Inception kind of incident right here on this show, because I recently went on Don Jr.'s show, and he broke some news on his own show, but I was there for it, and the show aired last night. So now on my show, I'm going to air Don Jr.'s show, specifically a segment in which I talked to Don Jr. about a suggestion that I had made for the White House briefing room. Namely, I suggested that the next press secretary, to really reset the relationship between the citizen and the press, the Republican Party and the press too, should rip up that seating chart and kick out some of the old establishment outlets that have a credibility problem and an influence problem and put in some of the new media outlets that have more credibility and more eyeballs on them. And Mr. Trump, Don Jr., broke this little bit of news.
So we're going to break some news here because I literally had this conversation. I was flying back. I was on the plane, I guess, with my father I think it was coming back from the SpaceX launch with Elon last week. And I was sitting there and we were talking about like the podcast world and some of our friends and Rogan and guys like you and, me to a lesser extent, I wouldn't be able to get a seat. That would be nepotism or whatever the hell, I'd be indicted again. I'd have to do more congressional testimony, so I'll pass. But we actually had this conversation about opening up the press room to a lot of these independent journalists. Why should, if the New York Times has lied, they've been adverse to everything, they're functioning as the marketing arm of the Democrat Party, why not open it up to people who have larger viewerships, stronger followings? It's not like the New York, how much money are they losing a year? The Washington Post, lost $45 to $70 million, doesn't seem like they're a great success. So we've had that conversation. That's a great idea, Don. I was like, I think we should do this. And so that may be in the works. Let's see. That's going to blow up some heads. So, we'll see.
Love this. This is a great idea. Good stuff on Don Jr. getting this in his father's ear. Great stuff from President Trump, who apparently is quite open to it. This is massive because Trump has a mandate. It is the re-election of Trump was in many ways a big middle finger by the American people to the political class. Unified government. They want big changes. And one way to do this that not a lot of people are totally aware of is you have to reset the relationship with the press, which acts as the medium through which we view our government and interact with our government. And now is the time. They are down. They are weak. They are losing. They're hemorrhaging viewership. CNN is in huge trouble. MSNBC is on the chopping block. The New York Times, Washington Post admit that podcasters are eating their lunch. So this is it. They are down, and we need to kick them while they're down. We need to kick them really, really hard while they're down and reset the relationship in a way that, by the way, is just, because the whole point of the White House briefing room is to allow the White House to communicate with the American people, to allow the American people to have their questions answered by the White House. So how about the people that act as those media, how about those people be the ones that have credibility and that actually have the attention of the American people? Makes perfect sense. Great stuff. I can't wait to see it. Our Daily Wire Plus Black Friday sale is live. Get 50% off new annual memberships right now. Normally, this is where I would share a promo code. Well, not today. No code is needed. Just head on over to dailywire.com/Black Friday and claim your new Daily Wire Plus membership for 50% off. No promo code, just a slash. There is a slash in there. Daily Wire Plus, you get it all. Uncensored daily shows with limited ads, live breaking news you can trust, premium entertainment reshaping culture. From the decade's #1 documentary, Am I Racist?, to exclusive series and hit movies, Daily Wire Plus offers it all and more. Your support makes this fight possible. Do not wait. Join the fight. Save 50% today. Go to dailywire.com/Black Friday. My favorite comment yesterday is from Rachel Atkins, 2882, says, I would trust Dr. Ben Carson for Surgeon General. I agree. That'd be nice. I like that. I'd trust Dr. Ben Carson in most roles, but Surgeon General, he'd be great. Now, speaking of the White House, I've got some delicious, delicious news for you. This by way of Politico. Harris is telling her advisors and allies to keep her political options open. Here it is. Kamala Harris has been lying low since her defeat in the presidential race, unwinding with family and senior aides in Hawaii before heading back to the nation's capital. But privately, the vice president has been instructing advisors and allies to keep her options open, whether for a possible 2028 presidential run or even a run for governor of her home state of California in 2 years. As Harris has repeated in phone calls, I am staying in the fight. I won't read the rest of the article. You can read it too. Man, I'm telling you to read the New York Times today. I'm telling you to read Politico today, but this one you're going to want to read. This reminds me of my friend who subscribed to MSNBC on election night just to watch their meltdowns. Well, I feel this way with Politico today. You tell him that the lady who's never managed to win a presidential primary vote while running for president ever once in her life, who's run for president once and then got the nomination during the time that she didn't run for president, who lost in a massive landslide, who allowed the Republican to win the popular vote for the first time in 20 years. The Republican who we'd all been told was Hitler reincarnate, who was running for an implausible non-consecutive second term. That woman wants to run again in 2028. I strongly encourage this. I might donate to the Kamala primary campaign. Let me know, Kamala, let me know where the PAC is, where to send the money. I'll buy the merch. It's cool. Let me know. This is great. Please. Now, you know that Gavin Newsom wants to run. You know that Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania wants to run. You know that Gretchen Whitmer, I think, wants to run. You know that Mayor Pete Buttigieg wants to run. There's going to be a lot of competition. But whatever we can do to get Kamala across the finish line for the nomination in 2028, 2032, 2036, definitely 2040, let's do it. Let's get it done. Speaking of women in politics, a little story about a friend of mine up in Canada, America's evil top hat. Kamala's from Canada, and so is my friend Lauren Southern, who was just hauled before Canadian Parliament because Lauren Southern had a contract with this company, Tenet Media. And Tenet Media was apparently taking money from the Russians, and they paid some right-wing influencers. I didn't get a single ruble, I'm sorry to report, but this was blown up in the establishment media as the Russians buying the 2024 election, as the Russians exerting their influence in the West. So Lauren was hauled before Canadian Parliament. Here is her opening statement.
Honorable Chair, esteemed members of this committee, I would like to thank you for so enthusiastically inviting me to speak today. My name is Lauren Southern. I am a filmmaker, a YouTuber, and a proud Canadian. In late 2023, I was contracted to make weekly videos by a startup company called Tenet Media. Some in the media, and even witnesses to this committee, have attempted to paint a picture of Tenet as a hugely influential player in the political media landscape. This, frankly, is just not true. A previous witness to this committee, who went unchallenged, stated that Tenet Media controlled a network of over 16 million subscribers. This is not true. On their largest platform, YouTube, Tenet had barely over 300,000 subscribers. I believe the 16 million figure referred to the total number of subscribers among all of the personalities who had videos contracted or licensed by Tenet. Subscriber base is that, given all of the facts, Tenet had absolutely no control over. To claim that Tenet controlled those subscribers would be like claiming that a TV network had influence over the United States presidency because they air reruns of The Apprentice.
I love that analogy. She goes on, the whole testimony is really worth watching because she really manhandles the liberal Canadian MPs. But it's an important point because you know they're going to resurrect this story. They tried it at the end of the election. It didn't quite work. But the media, dishonest as they are, they got the story not just a little bit wrong, but they got it perfectly wrong. They said that the Russians had been paying off these right-wing influencers, and they had this massive influence, 16 million followers and zillions of views. And what's ironic about this is the story of Tenet Media is the opposite. The Russians dumped 10 million or more, I think maybe it was $16 million, something like that, into right-wing media in America, and they got basically nothing for it. As Lauren says there, they licensed videos. So videos that were already made, they licensed them to put them on their channels. So it had no influence over that whatsoever. They just paid for videos that already existed. In some cases, they contracted weekly videos, but they did it through this intermediary, so it wasn't in any way clear that this was coming for the Russians. The videos usually had nothing to do with anything that might even pertain to the Russians. And in terms of their own actual reach, they got, at best, what was it? 300,000 YouTube subscribers, which is nothing. I say this as someone who has a moderately sized YouTube channel, but a moderately sized YouTube channel is still millions of YouTube subscribers. The real story, if a real journalist wanted to write the interesting story of Tenet Media, the interesting story would be that the Russians were totally incompetent and they blew a ton of money and they got no return on their investment. So anyway, good performance as usual from Lauren Southern. Speaking of leftist ignorance, before we go, I can't let CNN off the hook. A Democrat strategist went on CNN some days ago and demonstrated why we want to kick people like them out of the White House briefing room. It's not just because they're ideological. It's not just because they oppose us. It's because they don't really know anything and they don't have any credibility. Here, a Democrat strategist describes U.S. troops using AK-47s.
I agree. You don't want 19-year-old boys with AKs in the middle of whatever protests are going on, because no matter what happens, you're going to see a protest from whether you put a U.S. Army person or a young man or a young woman in an impossible situation, and it could only end badly.
Can only end badly. We're giving them these AK-47s. Now, for those of you who do not know, we do not outfit our troops with AK-47s. The Soviets used AK-47s during the Cold War, and then the AK-47s ended up in Afghanistan. And that's why you see guys like Osama bin Laden with AK-47s. We don't do that. We use M16s. We use a lot of other guns too. But this is kind of military guns 101. If you don't know that, you probably don't know much else about the military or about firearms or really about much of anything. And they wonder why people do not trust the media. Final point to end on. I mentioned it as it was occurring some days ago, but I want to play a little clip of this. The Senate races are all over. Bob Casey in Pennsylvania has finally given up. Here's his concession.
I just called Dave McCormick to congratulate him on his election to represent Pennsylvania in the United States Senate. As the first count of ballots is completed, Pennsylvanians can move forward with the knowledge that their voices were heard, whether their vote was the first to be counted or the last. This race was one of the closest in our Commonwealth's history, decided by less than a quarter of a point. I'm grateful to the thousands of people who worked to make sure that every eligible vote cast could be counted, including election officials in all 67 counties. When a Pennsylvanian takes the time to cast a legal vote, often waiting in long lines and taking time away from their work and family, they deserve to know that their vote will count. That's democracy. I'm proud of the work we've done since Election Day to enfranchise voters across the state.
This guy is just a caricature of a politician. The way he talks, you can sense the brimming fury here. This guy has been trying to overturn the results of this election for weeks at this point, and he finally stopped. I'm glad he stopped trying to overturn the results of the election. The only reason this is happening is because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ordered multiple counties to stop openly violating the law, and the Supreme Court had to do this multiple times. That's the only reason. We go, no, every vote's been cast. I'm happy that finally our people's voices were heard. It's such tripe. It's so ridiculous. This guy, Bob Casey, did everything in his power to overturn the election. It didn't work. The Democrats are going to try even harder next time. You cannot let up the fight. They're dropping the cases against Trump now. They're going to pick him up after he leaves office. They're going to try to imprison the next guy. They are not giving up. We need structural change on how Democrats can rig elections and on how they can go after political opponents. We need structural, durable change to make sure that this little blip, this reprieve that we've been given, can endure. All right, now, I've got my friend Eric Metaxas coming on the show in the Membrum Segmentum, but you can't be just one of the hoi polloi to watch it. You've got to go to the creme de la creme, to the Membrum Segmentum. The rest of the show continues. Now go to dailywire.com, use promo code Knowles, KNWLAS, at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans.